It's the first time this summer where I've genuinely been excited about the transfer window. Maybe it's my desperation to see us succeed that has meant I've been a little bit frustrated so far and a little bit perhaps underwhelmed. But here we are. It's the 1st of July. The reports are intensifying. Now, Arsenal, you need to go out and execute. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast live with me, Harry Symeou. Let's get into all the latest Arsenal news. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Happy Tuesday to each and every one of you. Hope you're all having a wonderful day so far, enjoying the warm weather. Oh, it was another difficult night, wasn't it, here in London in terms of sleeping. I was fine up until I needed to sleep. Normally I sleep like a baby in the heat, but yesterday it was probably just a little bit over the top in terms of what we can handle here in London. I know I always moan about the weather when it's bad, so I sound like a bit of a hypocrite complaining about the heat. Today is not normally something I would do, but last night it was a tough one, I've got to say. But anyway, here we are ready to talk Arsenal. And we've had some exciting updates since the last episode. We got the news yesterday, and we're going to talk about this in a lot more detail as the show goes on, but we did get the news yesterday that Arsenal had made contact with Eberechi Eze. And that news broke, I want to say a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours after we went live with the episode. And I've got to be honest, there was a part of me that thought, shall I jump on and do a bonus episode of the podcast? Or would I just be saying the things that I've already said about Eberechi Eze? And so I decided against it in the end. I decided to take in the sunshine and enjoy the weather with a view to kind of discussing it in a lot more detail this morning. But since that, then we've got even more an update. David Ornstein has come out and backed up the reports claiming that Arsenal have made contact with Eberechi Eze. And there's some exciting stuff in his Athletic piece this morning. So we're going to work our way through all of that on today's episode. I'm really, really looking forward to it. If I could just ask you, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and all the rest of it. And yeah, let's get into another jam-packed show of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. We got to start off by very, very quickly touching on the Club World Cup. Al Hilal knocked Manchester City out of the competition overnight. And that result and that outcome has been met with a lot of surprise. It's been met with a lot of questions, and people are sort of looking at Manchester City and saying, well, you know, they fell off last year and, you know, they've done some good recruitment. Some of those players are already in and participating at the Club World Cup. And is it actually a sure thing that Manchester City are going to be back competing at the highest level? Those are the questions that are being posed off the back of this defeat to Al Hilal. But let me tell you this, right? I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I followed the Club World Cup as closely as a lot of others. I've watched all the highlights. I've been across the results. But look, there have been nights where I've not had anything to do and I've been chilling at home and I've stuck it on. And there have been nights where, you know, I've looked at it and I've gone, well, I don't really want to prioritize that over maybe something else, or taking the time during the summer to maybe do something with the family or do something a little bit different. So I won't sit here and pretend that I've watched all of the Al Hilal games, but when I have seen them, I've been quite impressed. And then it kind of leads me on to the question of, should we actually be surprised that Al Hilal have knocked Manchester City out of the competition? Now, don't get me wrong, City were the favourites and were right to be the favourites. But the Saudi Pro League side, who beat Pep Guardiola's men by 4-3 after extra time, have got Bono in goal, who was outstanding and has been outstanding throughout this tournament. Joao Cancelo, Koulibaly, Renan Lodi, Ruben Neves, Malcolm, Milinkovic, Savic. All of these players were in that Al Hilal starting 11. So I'm not saying it's not a surprise and it's not a shock and they haven't achieved something brilliant, but I don't think it is as big a surprise, as big a shock as what some people are making it out to be at this moment in time. So yeah, that's my take on that. Elsewhere, I want to touch on some comments made by Brentford's sporting director, Phil Giles. He was asked about the Christian Norgaard to Arsenal situation, and he said he has earned the opportunity to try and win trophies. He said, yes, Arsenal approached us a couple of weeks ago, and at the moment it's heading in that direction. It's more likely to happen than not, although it is, not complete at this stage. Now, from what I'm hearing and from what we're reading, it looks like Christian Norgaard is going to have a medical at Arsenal at some point this week. So we're not a million miles away from getting to the point where we can say it's time for the announcement, but I'm not sure that we're going to get that announcement today. In fact, I'm almost certain that we won't get that one today. A lot of people were thinking that, 1st of July, we're going to get a load of announcements. Let's give you a quick update on this kind of state of play when it comes to some of these signings that, we've been talking about as almost done deals, right? So Kepa Arrizabalaga, that is pretty much done. And I think you could get an announcement on that one this week. Martin Zubimendi is done. And I think you will probably get an announcement on that one this week. Christian Norgaard, as I mentioned, as far as we're aware, hasn't had the medical yet. So talk of an announcement is a little bit premature around that one. And when it comes to Christian Mosquera, we're still in negotiations with Valencia over the price for the player. But I do think that one, again, like the Norgaard thing, is moving in the right direction. And it's a signing I expect us to get done and get over the line. The 1st of July is significant because for a long time when we've been trying to calm the masses down, the angry mobs down, one of the things we've been saying quite a bit is that 1st of July, new PSR stuff, all the rest of it. And it's kind of like a reset as far as PSR is concerned, which means you're probably going to see more movement after that. I do think that's the case. But I don't think that just because it's the 1st of July, you're going to get like 2 or 3 announcements today. I think you still have to acknowledge that not all of these deals are completed yet. I think some of them are moving in the right direction. I believe Kepa's done. I believe Zubimendi's done. Norgaard, not quite. Mosquera, not quite. Although, Norgaard is ahead of Mosquera from what we understand, at least with Brentford, we'd agreed a fee. When it comes to Mosquera, we're not quite there with Valencia yet, but we will get there very, very soon. So that's at least 4 kind of moving in the right direction and pretty much, moving forward and almost there and almost over the line. So that's good, but we still need more. And I think the attacking signings are the ones that people were really looking out for going into the summer window. And so for that reason, that's where the scrutiny and the focus is going to be. We're going to talk loads about what we should do in that attacking area. We've talked a lot about it already this summer. But yeah, let's go over to the comments and then we'll move on to that. We're going to talk Eze. We're going to talk some of the other players mentioned in David Ornstein's piece. We're going to talk about the striker situation as well, because it very much is decision time when it comes to that. So yeah, lots to get into. Rumble says it should be Harry, basically, that everybody should be announced today. We've been told July the 1st, so I'm expecting signings today to be announced. Okay. So with pre-season starting in about a week's time, or just under a week's time, what's the difference if it gets announced today or if it gets announced in 3 or 4 days' time? Like, that is the classic example of someone just being angry for the sake of being angry. Like, it makes zero material difference whether Zubimendi, for example, is announced today or if he's announced on Thursday, Friday. It really, really does make zero difference. And on deals like that, where I know that they're done and I'm confident that everything's in order and everything's in place, I'm not massively stressed or fussed about the announcement date specifically. I do think that if I was Arsenal, knowing that we haven't done, anything really in terms of official announcements yet, and knowing that the fans are going to get a little bit agitated and a little bit frustrated, I would be pushing it. I would be doing my utmost to get those deals done and announced. But also, I'm not going to be like stressing about it to the point where, I'm rushing things, I'm putting out crap announcements and all the rest of it. When I say crap announcements, I mean announcements that aren't very well thought out. Fans love that stuff these days. And especially around a signing like Martin Zubimendi, like Kepa Arrizabalaga is coming in as a backup goalkeeper. Okay. Christian Norgaard, everybody keeps telling me he's coming in as a backup midfielder. Christian Mosquera would be coming in as a backup centre half. But Martin Zubimendi is supposed to be a marquee signing. Martin Zubimendi is supposed to be a flagship signing. He's supposed to be Arsenal's number 6 for the years going forward now, and a real key part and key component of this team going into the new campaign. So for me, that's one where you should put the effort in, where you should, really kind of pull out all the stops and generate and build that excitement among the fans, because the excitement has dwindled a little bit. And the reason for that is not because people don't believe that Martin Zubimendi is a good signing. I've expressed the odd concern about him, but overall, I think it's a good acquisition, and I think he's a good addition to the squad and a good addition to the first 11. But the reason people are probably going to be a little bit underwhelmed, or there's not going to be that fanfare around the announcement that there should be, is because it's dragged out for such a long time. We've known this was on the cards and pretty much done for months and months and months. And yes, we did have a little wobble. We did have a period of time where we wondered if Real Madrid were going to come in and try and take him away and all the rest of it. That hasn't materialized. That hasn't happened. He will be an Arsenal player. I'd love the announcement to come today. I'd love the announcement sooner rather than later. I hope it's a good, well thought, well put together announcement to kind of set that tone and get people buzzing and excited. But I think today's updates are enough to make you think that Arsenal mean business. And this is the first time in the window I've really felt that way. And that's not because I'm Mr. Negative or because I'm Mr. Grumpy. Those of you that watch this or listen to this regularly will have probably at some point labeled me the opposite. Toxic positive is what I get called quite often. So for me to have been a little bit underwhelmed throughout the month of June and feeling a little bit frustrated and like not a great deal was happening. Yes, we know of talks going on behind the scenes. We know of people sort of being scouted and being looked at and being involved in discussions with Arsenal Football Club, but you want to see action. So I understand the want for the announcements. I understand why people are looking at it and going, July 1st, you all told us July 1st, let's get going. I get that. But if it happens in 3-4 days' time, honestly, it's neither here nor there. And it really isn't a big deal. It really, really isn't. Okay, on the striker thing, and I think this is probably the source of most people's frustration. You know, we went into the summer knowing that we needed a centre forward. We knew that Benjamin Sesko was on the radar. And very early on in the summer, we knew that Viktor Gyökeres was being considered as an option as well. Okay. So I think July 1st brings us to a place where, at least for me, it's time now to put your foot down on the accelerator and accelerate in your plans to bring either one of those two, or Ekitike or Ollie Watkins, whoever it might be. But in order to do that, you need to have made a decision. Now, I've said repeatedly throughout the course of the summer so far that I'm certain Arsenal know internally which player they would prefer. And my gut feel is that that player is Benjamin Sesko. My opinion and my view is that he's the one they've been watching for a while. He's the one that they feel would provide a long-term solution. He's the one they believe has the high ceiling and the one that they want to go with. You've had enough time over the course of June to figure out what it is going to take, or have an understanding of a kind of rough price point whereby you would need to reach to get that deal done. So come July 1st, which is where we are today, the decision has to be made. Now, you can have a decision in mind and you can accelerate to try and execute that transfer and hit a couple of brick walls. And those brick walls may have been placed in front of you by RB Leipzig, or in Gyökeres' case, Sporting Lisbon. And there's not much you can do to navigate around those brick walls. You certainly don't want to smash through them, in which case you'd be paying crazy amounts of money. So you're probably looking for a way around them. If you can't find a way around, then you pivot to the other one. But really and truly now, having entered July, it is decision time on the striker. And that's not who your preference is. That's right. Okay, we know what it's going to take to get Gyökeres. We should have done all that work already. We know what it's going to take to get Benjamin Sesko. We've got a rough idea of how we'd be looking in terms of personal terms with those players. Let's go for the one that we really want and go all out and make it happen now. We should be at that point by now. Now, again, I want the striker in by the start of pre-season. If that runs over by 2, 3, 4 days, even a week, but it means we get the right deal and the right player, more importantly, then fine. But the pressure on Arsenal now to kind of really step up their efforts and execute on one of these transfers is going to grow. It's going to grow because we've hit July. Pre-season is just around the corner. And this is a position that we should have been prepared to go and recruit for from ages ago, because it's a need we've had probably now for at the very least 2 seasons. Gyökeres and Sesko are the 2 most likely. And it feels like it probably will be one of them. But there are other names in the equation, other names in the mix. Ollie Watkins was mentioned again in the Athletics piece. So he's someone that remains on the radar. Hugo Ekitike, we talked about him yesterday. So, yeah, it's time now, isn't it, to move forward with those plans. Guitar Solo said, who said the decision has not been made, Harry? You said yourself that it does not matter whether the signing is on the 1st or the 6th, but now you are also saying now. No, I'm not saying now. I'm saying I appreciate that it might not happen today, and it might happen in a week or slightly longer than that. And we might roll into pre-season a little bit before we get our man in through the door. What I am saying is that at this point, we shouldn't be still exploring the parameters of either deal. We shouldn't be in a position where we're still talking to Sporting or talking to Viktor Gyökeres' camp about what it would take to bring him to the Arsenal. And the same with Benjamin Sesko. We should by now have a very clear understanding of what it will require to get said player in through the door. And based on that, we should have made our decision. And now we should be at the point of execution. Now we should be looking to accelerate and get that deal done. I'm not saying today. I'm saying that it needs to be done in the next week or so if Arsenal are going to get that player in nice and early and get us ready to go in pre-season. Now, again, if you miss the first few days of pre-season, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. And if you get the best deal and the right player, more importantly, because you rolled over an extra few days and didn't do anything hasty, fine. But I don't think we are going to take kindly as supporters now to this narrative of, yeah, Arsenal are talking to him, but they're also talking to him. And they're in discussions with X player, but they're also trying to get an understanding of what it would take to get Y player in. Do you see what I mean? We shouldn't be at that point. We should be beyond that. We should be past that. We should very clearly know who our primary targets are, and we should be going out and trying to make those deals happen. And I'm sure internally there are preferences. Those preferences are already there. But based on all the reporting and everything we're reading, and you even read David Ornstein's piece today, where he talks about what Arsenal are hoping to do outside of some of the players that we've been really kind of solidly linked with. And he's saying things like, Andrea Berta has to balance things, and he's got to find that balance, and he's got to, do things based on what we do in terms of what we spend on a striker. And, there'll be players leaving, and what can we get in for those players? I get that not everything is cut and dry in terms of what Arsenal will be able to spend, but we should know what we want to do. We probably do, but as fans, we're not sure. And we're in a place where we're a little bit uncertain still. And that creates this frustration within the fan base, I think. So, yeah, that's where I'm at in terms of the window now. July 1st, time to put your foot on the gas, time to accelerate things a little bit. Right, really, 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 really brief pause. And then we're going to talk Eze. We're going to talk Madueke. We're going to talk Rodgers. And we're going to talk Andrea Berta. So lots to come still on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe. It really, really does help. Let's just quickly check in where we're at in terms of the likes. There's about 500 of you with us live right now. Only 100 likes on the board, though. Can we get it to 250? That would be amazing. I promise you the juicy part is still to come. Because right now, we're going to talk Eberechi Eze. Actually, in just a minute, we're going to talk Eberechi Eze. First, I just want to let you guys know that you can become a patron of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast by visiting the link in the description. We've got scouting videos coming your way around the players that Arsenal are being seriously linked with. We released the Christian Norgaard one over the weekend. So go and check that out if you haven't done so already. We've got a Mosquera one coming up, and we've got an Eberechi Eze one coming up. That has been added to the list since yesterday's update. But here's a very short preview of what we do in these scouting videos. Here's a clip from the Christian Norgaard one that we put out over the weekend. Enjoy, check it out. And if you fancy this type of content, head over to our Patreon page and give us a subscribe. Here's a little sneak peek. For someone like Christian Norgaard, this is what I'm more interested in. You know, what can he do moving forward? I know he can defend. I know he can destroy. I know he can break up play. But in our case, we're going to be in a lot of situations where we're trying to break opposition down and not vice versa. And so, yes, you know, hopefully he can help us be a little bit more transition resistant. We tend to face transitional teams nowadays. And if he can do that, that'll be great. But I think for me, the big question mark is what can he give us going forward? And here you're seeing him bite back, prevent danger. We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing him win the ball here high up and then laying it off to the likes of Brian and Bumo, who's also on his way out of Brentford, by the way. I fear for them, I have to say, losing him, losing Norgaard, and having already lost Thomas Frank as well. Here he is picking the pocket and then just helping it into the path of a Danish teammate. Here again, look, he watches the run from outside to in, just anticipates and picks his moment as to when to kind of bite. There you go. That was a sneak peek of what you can find over on the Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon. The link is in the description. Right, let's talk Eberechi Eze now, shall we? Are Arsenal serious about their interest in the Crystal Palace man? It certainly feels like it. Okay, so Fabrizio Romano reported on Monday that Arsenal had open talks with Eberechi Eze's camp. That was followed up. Hand of Arsenal reported that there was a meeting that took place over the weekend. However, there had been no contact with Crystal Palace themselves. Now, David Ornstein has since come out and corroborated all of that. So, you know, the talks feel real, and it feels like Arsenal are showing a genuine interest in signing Eberechi Eze. No approach to Crystal Palace, probably because Arsenal know what it's going to take to sign him. He's got a £67.5 million release clause based on what I'm reading. Some people are quoting the figure at slightly less. So I'm not entirely sure what the ins and outs of that are. I think it's difficult sometimes to know exactly what these release clauses look like, but there is one in place. And Eberechi Eze could be on the move this summer. There was a lot of talk about him joining Tottenham during the month of June, but David Ornstein has said that Tottenham are not pursuing the player, probably because they know that he wants to come to Arsenal. Now, this would be a really, really good signing. David Ornstein also goes on to say, interestingly, that Arsenal are looking to pay below the release clause for the Crystal Palace man. And I can imagine that there'll be people out there screaming back at their headphones going, what? Just pay the damn money. Go and get the player. But this is the really interesting point about Eberechi Eze and this release clause. He is out of contract at Crystal Palace in 2027. Okay, so after this season, he will be in the final year of his contract. If he goes into the final year of his contract, do Crystal Palace really believe that anybody would pay 67.5 million? Because they won't. They'll wait. They'll hold on. They'll try and put a pre-contract agreement in place. That's what they'll do. So it feels like for Crystal Palace, this is the last summer whereby they can get even close to that amount of money for Eberechi Eze without him signing a new contract. Arsenal know that. Arsenal understand that. Andrea Berta will be all over that. And for that reason, I think Arsenal are right to try their luck at slightly less. Now, I'm not saying completely lowball Crystal Palace to the point where you insult them and make negotiations nigh on impossible. No, I'm not saying that. But if you could save 10, 15 million pounds on the price because of this, that would make good business sense. And I think that that's something that Arsenal should be exploring. So when I first read it, I thought, oh, here we go. Typical Arsenal, wanting to just lowball and trying to save a few quid, etc., etc. We know what the release clause is. There doesn't need to be any negotiation around that. Just go and pay the damn money and get the player. That was my initial thought. And then I thought about it. And I looked into Eze's contract situation. And, you know, I started to think about, yes, that release clause exists, but how realistic is it that going into any point basically beyond this summer, that they're going to get that money? 2027, the contract expires, so that'll be the 26-27 campaign next year, and that's the last one. And he's not gonna get fetch Crystal Palace that release clause during that period. So either you sell him for slightly less this summer, or you risk him running his contract down, a bit like Mark Gay's done, where isn't signing, but also Crystal Palace didn't want to sell him, and now they're at a point where they have to sell, and they're probably going to get a lot less than the 70 odd million quid that Newcastle United were offering to them last summer. So, yes, Crystal Palace are probably going to be playing in Europe as long as all that stuff goes okay in terms of the decision making, and they're probably going to have increased revenues and all the rest of it, and that's great. But yeah, I just think, this is an interesting bit of business. And when I was talking about the kind of validity of this link, and when I was talking about whether this would be a good sign and a good use of funds, I got to be honest, I was under the impression that this was going to be our left wing signing. And I was looking at it and I was going, well, Trossard and Martinelli are probably both going to stay. And so bringing in Eze, who can play on that left wing if you want to change it up a little bit and you want something different, but who can also play in those more central areas, makes quite a bit of sense. And so that was kind of the logic that I applied in terms of trying to decipher whether I thought it was a good deal or not. But now we're reading that actually this is a separate pursuit to that of a striker and a left winger, which has led me to the title of today's thumbnail, which is Arsenal mean business. Because, if they go and get 3 attacking players, I think that's huge. Huge. Massive, in fact. I think that'll be a real statement of intent, because if they did that and then they've brought in Kepa, all right, cheap, fine. Norgaard, cheap, fine. Zubimendi and Mosquera, then you're talking about 7 signings in the summer. And if Arsenal made 7 signings this summer with probably 2, 3 maximum departures that are going to bring you any value, then that indicates that they mean business. Now, I'm saying they mean business today based on the links and all the reports that we're reading, but obviously they've got to go and make that happen for me to be sitting there going like that. But if they brought 7 signings in, and the attacking signings were of a real high caliber in particular, and the kind of players that I felt could elevate us and take us to that next level, I'll be delighted. And I'll sit here and I'll say, and I'll hold my hands up and say, I was stupid to be frustrated in June. I was silly to be getting agitated by the lack of movement, at least as far as we knew and were aware of. But you've still got to make that happen. I take encouragement from the reports that we're reading. I take encouragement from the fact that Arsenal have the intention of signing 3 attacking players. I think 2 of them will probably be high value. 1 of them will probably be slightly lesser value in terms of what we outlay just to balance the books, because David Ornstein does go on to say that given the anticipated big outlay on a central striker, the delicate balancing act, and he's talking financially, is the primary challenge for Andrea Berta this summer. So yeah, interesting stuff. Really, really interesting stuff. Some of the other names mentioned in the article, Noni Madueke, we keep hearing that. I've got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of that idea. I think that Noni Madueke is a decent enough player. I don't think he moves the needle for Arsenal. And I think to get him from Chelsea, you're probably going to pay a little bit over the top. And I'm not sure that at this very critical stage that we're at in terms of the project, that I would advocate for paying over the odds for a player that still has a lot to prove, like Noni Madueke. Morgan Rogers has been talked about again. Could Aston Villa be forced into a position where they have to sell because of PSR? Their situation in that regard is not great. They're probably going to lose one of him or Watkins or someone else of value over the course of the summer. There's probably going to be a point where the money comes across the table in terms of an offer, and it's taken away from Unai Emery in terms of the decision making, and it's taken out of his hands, and we move forward. So yeah, let's see what's going to happen. Let's see what's going to happen on that front. Look, we're going to spend the rest of the show taking your thoughts, your questions. from the live chat. I'm very, very much looking forward to that. So get them in now. Pop a Q at the start of your question, so it's easy for me to pick out. We'll do the last 15 or so from the live chat. We'll do that next. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Oh man, the comment section does, I should say, makes me laugh at times. Amazon Andy says, Harry, you're a good lad. Thank you, mate. But he says, at times you're too vanilla. Get yourself a personality and a clear view in life, or work on expressing said. I like you, which is why I'm saying this. Thank you for the life advice, mate. I've got plenty of personality. Don't you worry about that. And I do have a clear view on all things that we discuss on here. It might not be the same view as yours, but it is a clear view. And my view is that if Arsenal are intending to go out and bring in the three attacking signings, if two of them are one of Sesko and Gyökeres and Eberechi Eze, I think that's pretty cool. And I think that's a pretty good way of moving forward and improving our attack. Afsar says, Harry, congrats on reaching 42k subs. Thank you. I didn't even realize, but we must have crossed the 42k mark, which is amazing. We're on the road to 50 now, aren't we? Very much so. Hopefully we can get there ASAP. Okay, let's take some more of your comments and questions and thoughts from the live chat. I'm a real gunner says, Harry, I'm honest. I'm not that convinced by Berta like our fan base is. How easy is it? How easy it is. They forgot the 70 million he lost on Joao Felix. That's a really, really unique transfer. Now, listen, I haven't got a point of view at this moment, not a strong one anyway, on Andrea Berta, because I don't think he's had anywhere near enough time in the job for us to make a serious judgment on him. And you might say that that's me being vanilla, and that's me lacking a clear view or a personality, whatever it was that the Amazon fella said. But look, if you go and explore that Joao Felix transfer, and there was a really good piece over on Tom Canton's The Gooner Talk some months ago now, when Andrea Berta first arrived, and Sid Lowe was talking. He's a Spanish football expert, very, very well respected. And he was talking about the Joao Felix transfer. And if I'm not mistaken, he said very clearly that that was one that was taken out of Andrea Berta's hands. It's not me making excuses for him. I just think you need to understand the full context of that. He was one that the ownership really, really wanted, that the president really, really wanted. And the club proceeded to do that deal as a result. He's got loads of deals right. He's got some deals wrong. There isn't a sporting director in world football that will have a hit and a success rate on every single transfer that they negotiate. So we got to give him time. We got to give him the opportunity to prove himself. I'm not angry at him right now or outraged by what he's done so far. I don't think you can judge him on the 1st of July. I think even judging him at the end of the window is probably a little bit premature, because you don't know how those signings are going to pan out. I think you can only ever really judge how good or bad a transfer window was sometimes, 12 months down the line. Like now I look back at last summer, and although at the time there were question marks about it, and at the time we were talking about it maybe being a little bit underwhelming, certainly in the attacking department, having brought in Raheem Sterling and no one else, I felt that way. But, it took me months to look back and go, yeah, you know what, definitively, because I wanted to give it a chance. Definitively, okay, Marino gave us something in the back end of the season when he was playing at centre forward. Calafiori was injured too much, and Raheem Sterling just gave us absolutely zero. And so, sometimes you need to let these things play out. And I think it's very harsh to go after Andrea Berta now. Let's see, what he brings in, how those signings work out, and the position we find ourselves in this same time next year. What else have we got in the live chat box? Let's roll through it. Sniper Scope says, what constitutes a 10 out of 10 window? Gyökeres, Rodrigo, Zubi, Eze, and Mosquera. There'd be Norgaard and Kepa in there as well. Yeah, that would be a really strong window, wouldn't it? I mean, whether it's 10 out of 10 or not, that'll be, I think, depending on your opinion and views on those individual players. But that would be a really solid window, wouldn't it? For sure. Chris Rutledge says, do you think Ekitike would be a better option than Sesko? We kind of had this debate yesterday, and while I'm not sure he would be. I don't think you can write him off and dismiss him because their records are pretty similar. And I also think that, for me, Ekatike feels more like Isak in terms of his skill set. And so if you went into the summer like me believing that Alexander Isak is the one, then surely you would be interested in a player whose qualities resemble those of the Swede. And Ekatike's, for me, in a lot of ways do. And the numbers tell you that, and the eye test tells you that. So I'm not going to sit here and go out on a limb and say he's definitely going to be a better option. But I don't think there's much between them. That was kind of my point yesterday. It was like, stop writing Ekatike off and saying, nope, he's not proven enough and all this and all that. And his skill set doesn't fit, etc., etc. But then blowing smoke up Benjamin Sesko's backside because you think he's the one we're going to end up with. They're both good options. They both come with an element of risk. But I wouldn't sit here and say, yes, he's definitely a better option. My point wasn't that yesterday. My point was that if you rate Sesko and you're looking at his numbers and you're nodding in approval, then how can you turn your nose up at Hugo Ekatike's? Junior Gunner says, would you sell Martinelli if we got an offer in excess of 60 million, providing we'd get what? We'd get 8 times in fee. I don't get that, sorry. And smash our transfer record on an underwhelming player. Oh, 8 times what we paid for him. Is that what you're trying to say there? We'd get 8 times what we paid for him, 8 times his fee. Would I sell him if we got an offer in excess of 60 million? I'd consider it. Yeah, for sure. Because I think, in order to upgrade, sometimes you have to make those difficult decisions. And someone that was right for the beginning of a journey might not necessarily be the right guy when you get to a certain stage of it. And I don't want to write the guy off because I think he offers the team a lot of really positive things. But do I think he's good enough in the final third? Do I think his decision-making is always right? No, I don't. And I think there's definitely room to improve on him. Tom says, hi, Harry. As I think Rodrigo will fight for his place at Real Madrid for at least one season. And Eze seems to be on top of the pure winger signing. Which other winger would you want us to go for? Honestly, I'm not sure. Rodrigo was my number one. Rodrigo's the guy that I kept saying, needle mover. No doubt about that. No question about that in my mind. I quite like Anthony Gordon, but I think that would be really difficult to do because of who he currently plays for. I'd gone off Nico Williams a little bit, and he's obviously seemingly going to join Barcelona. So that's a no-go at the moment. Rafael Leao blows a little bit hot and cold for me and would require too big an investment. I think if we got Eze in and we kept Martinelli and Trossard, I think we would be in a position then to roll the dice on a winger. You can't do that without Eze coming in, I don't think, because I think we need to bring in another option and an alternative to Trossard and Martinelli. And we obviously have Ethan Nwaneri who can back up Bukayo on the right-hand side. But I think if you get Eze in, I think you can afford probably just about to roll the dice on a winger that you see as a really interesting prospect. Without the Eze signing, I don't think you can do that, though. I think it's kind of one or the other. Footy New England says, listening to Harry's calming. Thank you. Other Arsenal content creators give you an anxiety attack while listening to him. Listen, people are passionate and they express it in different ways, don't they? They express it in different ways. Let's take a couple more. Rumble says, Berta hasn't done anything and still gets such high praise. He gets high praise for the previous work he's done, and rightly so. There isn't... We've got to be really careful of creating these false narratives, because it's one person expresses a dislike or an upset about something, and then everybody gets labeled with this kind of tag of being super negative and a horrible fan base and all the rest of it, and vice versa. You get 1 or 2 people or a small group of people saying, I quite like the look of what this guy's done in the past, hopefully he can deliver this at Arsenal as well. And everybody's like, oh my God, everybody backs him and whatever he does is right and he can do nothing wrong, blah, blah. Why do we have to deal in such extremes, man? That's not the way the world really works. Roy says, Harry, do you know concerning the players linked to us how well they speak English? to speed up integration? Well, Norgaard can speak English. Kepa will be able to speak English, I'm sure. Zubimendi, I'm not sure on. Mosquera, don't know. Those are the 4 that are currently in the pipeline. Eze would be no problem. Gyökeres definitely speaks good English. Not sure about Benjamin Sesko. Not sure I've heard him speak. But I'd imagine he can probably speak English. So yeah, I think we'll be fine with that. I think this day and age it's becoming less and less of a problem. Sooty FM says, and happy birthday, by the way, mate. I saw on Facebook this morning it's your birthday. Happy birthday. He says, Isak wants to leave. Should we put in an offer to try and rock the boat? So listen, I've not seen it reported really by anybody hugely credible, which is why I've not even included this in the show notes today. But I did hear from someone the other day, and I don't want to do that thing where I go, I heard from someone, but I can't tell you who it is. But that's exactly what I'm going to do. I heard that, he'd made his feelings known at the end of last season at Newcastle that he would be open to moving on. And obviously Newcastle hold all the cards because they've got him on this contract. And, they're a very wealthy football club these days and they won't be held to ransom and forced to sell him. And so I believe that the only chance of getting Alexander Isak out of there is if he really throws his toys out of the pram, makes us stink about it. And whichever club it is, whether it's us or Liverpool or somebody else that goes in for him is willing to pay that huge money. And then essentially everybody wins from that. Should we put an offer in to rock the boat? You've got to really know. I think, look, our relationship with Newcastle was crap already. And I think you've got to be really, really clear on the player's desire to come before you do that under these circumstances. And the reason I say that is because it's not like it's on the balance, right? This is not like, sometimes you get, for example, a situation where a club wants 100 million, you'd pay 85, don't really want to pay the 100, but there isn't that much of a gap to bridge should you both come to the negotiation table. As much as I love Alexander Isak, I cannot see a world in which Arsenal, if we're talking about Andrea Berta having to delicately balance things this summer, which is what was said in the Athletics piece this morning, you can't envisage a world where Arsenal would get close to 120, 130, 140 million, which is probably what Newcastle would demand. So for me, the only way that you would go in and make an offer and rock the boat, as you say, is if you felt like there was a gap in the two valuations that could be bridged. And I don't think the gap between what we would be willing to pay and what Newcastle would demand, unfortunately, can be bridged this summer, especially not without Alexander Isak kicking up a fuss. So, yeah, he's got to throw his toys out of the pram and be a bit of a baby, really, before we can think about that, I think. Anyway. What else have we got? Just scrolling through the chat, we'll pick out a couple more. Manny says, at what price would you consider Rashford as the winger? 20 million. It's my top line. I remember must have been about a year ago now. I remember being on 90 Min with the guys and getting into a massive debate with Scott Saunders and some of the rest of the guys about what Rashford was worth at the time of this kind of falling out at Manchester United. And I said 15 million and I was laughed at. So I saw him at Villa. I thought he'd done quite well at Villa. It looked like he kind of got back into the rhythm and the flow of things. And even though I think he's a little bit rough around the edges, Marcus Rashford, despite his experience and the number of games he's played, I still think there are certain elements of his game that need polishing. I think that at 20 million, I'd consider it. More than that, I probably walk away because he's going to want a big salary as well. So 20 million feels like the ceiling for me on that. It really, really does. Bailey Chloe says, all the Berta hate is wild. Think the man needs at least 2 windows, seeing as he's so fresh to the Arsenal team. Window's not over yet, barely started. I understand the past hurt, but damn, Gooners, chill. Yeah, I agree on that. And also as well, like, for example, the striker thing, right? In particular, in the case of Benjamin Sesko, that's an interest that predates Andrea Berta. So in this instance, he would be tasked with executing the deal, but not anything else, really. And with Martin Zubimendi, that was pretty much, from what we understand, wrapped up before he'd even joined the club. So that in itself, I think, indicates that it's a little bit early to judge Andrea Berta and what his value is to Arsenal Football Club and what he can bring. So yeah, I agree with all of that. Okay, I'm going to take one more question from Dirks, who says, if we landed our ideal 3 forwards, how much do you think we match up against Liverpool if they get Isak at a full-strength City? So first of all, I don't think anybody's getting Isak. And I don't understand why there is this kind of, there's this feeling within sections of our fan base that we're going to be embarrassed because Alexander Isak's going to join Liverpool. Now, if it happens, I'll be gobsmacked and I will be frustrated, because if he's available and we didn't try and we didn't push, then I'd be really disappointed, actually, because I think he's the ideal candidate and the ideal player. But at this moment in time, I don't think he is going to Liverpool. And in terms of City, I mean, City are strong on paper, and they always will be, because they've got the ability to spend big amounts of money. How they've got to that point is a debate for another day, and we won't go into that now. But yeah, if we get, let's say, for instance, we got Eze and we got one of Sesko and Gyökeres and another wide signing, plus the recruitment that we've done in midfield and we are hoping to do in the back line, I think we'd be in pretty good shape, because it's almost as though when you go into the summer, people forget that you actually had a good team to start with. Like, we've got some really good players already, like Saka. I rate Kai Havertz. Not everybody does. Trossard and Martinelli can contribute. You got Martin Odegaard, who can't possibly have a worse season than the one he's just had. The only way is up very much for him, I believe. Declan Rice, Gabriel Saliba at the back, Timber, White, Lewis Skelly, Raya in goal. We've got a lot already. And it's not a case of needing to reinvent the wheel here. We just need to refresh and renew in certain areas to just give us that little bit extra. So I think if we get those signings in that we've just discussed and mentioned, I think we'll be in a really good position to compete again. And that's what we want, isn't it? Okay, right. Gonna love you all and leave you. Can we get some more likes on the board? Don't like the chat, like the actual video itself. It really, really does help. Can we get up to a couple of hundred before I hit the end stream button? I'd be super grateful if we could. Don't forget to go over to the Patreon page and check out what we've got to offer. We've got some more stuff coming out and coming to you tomorrow on the Patreon side of things. So really, really looking forward to bringing you that. And I'll see you all very, very soon on another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner Pod. Until then, take care and have a wonderful Tuesday. Up the Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners.